Good morning. This is now the second week of our COVID-19 quarantine. And by this point, I'm sure that you've noticed that a lot of things are lacking, right? And on that list is touch. Um, you are not seeing and giving high fives and fist bumps and hugs uh, to the people that you see, normally on a daily basis. And that got me thinking. That got me thinking about liturgy, of course, and um, that's going to be the subject of our discussion today. So first up is just generally psychologically the role that touch plays in our lives. Not sure if you're aware of this, but psychologists have done research, and if a baby is not held, nuzzled, hugged enough, it can stop growing and even die. If a baby isn't touched, right? Which is pretty crazy to think about, like given all of the basic necessities, like um, sustenance and, warmth and all that, but isn't given touch, they can stop growing and even die. It's kind of crazy. Um, Additionally, a few years back, there's an article in New York Times from 2010 about the effect of touch in Major League Sports. That teams that regularly give high fives, fist bumps, and hugs actually perform better than teams that don't do that regularly. So this team of scientists documented every high five, fist bump, and hug in the NBA, and the top performing teams were the teams that also gave the most high fives and fist bumps and hugs. They were the touchier teams. So touch is not only important but beneficial, and in the case of babies, it's vital. So, transitioning now into religion, my mind first goes to, like, in religion there are things you don't touch, right? So in Judaism, the Torah is so sacred that you don't touch it. The Torah is kept in a tabernacle. It's wrapped in this like blanket, and when you take it out of the tabernacle, you process it in the blanket and bring it up to the bima, where it's uncovered, and then you scroll to the portion of the Torah that you're going to read with the wooden dowels that hold the scroll. And then, when you do read the Torah, you don't touch it. You instead you use your talit to touch it, which is like your shawl, but also you use a yad, which is a pointer, to follow along in the Torah. It's too sacred to touch. Also, practically, oil from your fingers could damage the scroll. Each of the scrolls is handwritten. So, in Judaism, it's too sacred to touch. Similarly, in Catholicism, we have things that are too sacred to touch. So, for instance, when we're doing adoration, adoration of the Eucharist, the priest will wear a humeral cape, and with that humeral cape, much like the talit in Judaism, he will take the Eucharist and put it in the monstrance. He'll handle the monstrance with the humeral cape. The monstrance is like this thing for displaying the Eucharist, and he doesn't touch it with his fingers, right? And no one touches it with their fingers because it's holy, right? And it shows this reverence. So there are things that you don't touch in religion. At the same time, however, in Catholicism, like there are a lot of things you do touch. Right? We are a very touchy religion. So we spoke about this earlier when we were talking about, right brain and the value of the Catholic Mass. But where else can you hold hands with, shake hands with, and even maybe hug strangers? Right? We bless ourselves all the time with holy water. We bless ourselves before the reading of the gospel. Um, we touch and consume the body of Christ. There's a lot of like tactile things in Catholicism, like the laying on of hands at confirmation. Right? So there's a lot of touch in Catholicism. But right now, we're acutely aware of the lack of touch because we're not going to Mass on Sunday, at a church. A lot of places are doing live stream. Loyola is no exception. And while this is a great substitute, and it's preventing people from getting sick and communicating the coronavirus, we also are aware that like there's a lot missing. So what are we missing? First and foremost, like we talked about before, is community. You're not there in communion with one another, which is what Mass is. It's communal prayer. We're missing music, which is another big subject for us. Most of these live streams did not include music. But then, to what we're talking about today is touch. We don't have all of those elements of touch that we get in a regular Mass because we're watching from a computer screen. So, the last thing that I want to talk about is to go back to Judaism, but to go way back. We're in a period right now that I think is very similar to a period of time of the Babylonian exile in 586 BC, when the Jews who were living in Jerusalem were hauled away into exile in Babylon. And at that time, when they were taken away, Jerusalem, and specifically the temple, was the only place on earth where you could worship and you could sacrifice. It was the center of religious life for Judaism at that time. But the temple was destroyed and they were hauled off into slavery in Babylon. And while they were there, they're still Jewish, right? But how do we worship God in a strange land? It's the subject of Psalm 137. And while they were there, what became very important to them was community and the Word. Community and the Word. And out of that, the synagogue was born. All these little satellite temples, places for community, for Torah learning, and for worship. And to this day, that is the format, more or less, of Judaism. It's synagogues, where the Word is what matters. It's not this place for sacrifice, but it's the Word. So my question for us today is, how are we going to adapt? How are we, believers, Catholics, Christians, in this age, this period of time where we are separated from one another, where we don't have touch, how are we going to adapt and stay true to our religion, to what we believe, but adapt to the changing world around us?